Hello students, welcome to the next video of control and coordination where we are going to continue our discussion about the nervous system. In the previous video, as you remember, we discussed about the central nervous system and in detail we did the spinal cord and the brain, the various parts of the brain. So what is peripheral nervous system we are going to see in this video. So I have shared my screen for that. And the topics that we are going to cover in this video include peripheral nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which are a part of autonomic nervous system. Okay. And then reflex action and reflex arc. Okay. So let's recall what is central nervous system. Central nervous system is the part of nervous system which includes brain and spinal cord. Okay, this is very important because peripheral nervous system, it consists of the nerves that are arising from the brain and spinal cord. Okay, so the first type of nerves are cranial nerves. Okay, these are the nerves arising from brain and spinal cord. Okay, in human beings, 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there. Then secondly, there are spinal nerves also, which are the nerves arising from spinal cord. Nerves arising from the spinal cord. Okay. In human beings, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Okay. 31 pairs of spinal nerves. So these nerves are only responsible for carrying the signals to and from the brain and the spinal cord, and without which the sensory uh, perception and the process of response also will not be possible. So you can understand the importance of the peripheral nervous system. So let's move on to the next type of nervous system, which is autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is involved with the involuntary actions, the involuntary changes that take place inside our body during any kind of emergency or when the body is at rest. So autonomic nervous system has two branches, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system is controlling the homeostasis in the body at rest and is responsible for body's rest and digest function. Sympathetic nervous system is controlling the body's responses to a perceived threat, that means during an emergency, and is responsible for the fight or flight response. Okay, suppose if you are in an emergency. Okay, emergency can be anything. For example, you are sensing extreme fear or you're excited. Okay, it can be either a positive or a negative feeling, doesn't matter. But the body is perceiving it as an emergency. So during an emergency, the sympathetic nervous system gets activated. And all the changes that you observe in your body during an emergency, for example, increase in the heartbeat, increase in blood pressure, your eyes become dilated, you get goose flesh on your skin, that are the goosebumps. Okay, all this is due to the changes that are made inside our body by the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, but when after the emergency is over, okay, and everything is normal, During the normal conditions, the parasympathetic nervous system brings everything to normal. That means the heartbeat becomes normal, the blood pressure becomes normal, the breathing rate becomes normal, the goose flesh disappear, and your eyes also, they come back to the normal size, and etc etc. There are some internal changes also, like more and more glucose will be released by the liver, because for the emergency purposes, if we need to fight or fly away from the situation, we need a lot of energy, and for that we need glucose. Okay, so these are some of the changes that are done by sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system respectively. So there is one more thing, like as we are studying control and coordination, so when the sympathetic nervous system is working during during an emergency, a hormone is released which is adrenaline. This adrenaline hormone is released from the adrenal medulla, which we will discuss in further videos. Okay, sympathetic nervous system is working in coordination with the this hormone that is secreted from adrenal medulla. So here there is a little bit of coordination between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Yes. So as you can see, some of the changes they are presented here. Pupil is dilated during an emergency. Salivation is inhibited. Bronchi relax. Heartbeat is accelerated. Peristalsis and secretion is inhibited. Glucose production and release is stimulated. Secretion of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are the two hormones that are secreted from the adrenal medulla, but they don't have different functions. They have the same function, although uh, names they appear to be, a little bit opposite. Bladder contraction also is inhibited, and orgasm can be stimulated. Okay. Parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, it is constricting the pupil. Okay. Yeah. So parasympathetic nervous system is constricting the pupil, stimulates saliva flow, constricts bronchi, slows down the heartbeat, stimulates peristalsis and secretion, stimulates bile release, and bladder contraction. All the things taking opposite to the sympathetic nervous system in the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so this is during an emergency, and this is when everything is normal. Okay. So let's move on to the reflex action and reflex arc. Now, see, when an animal, uh, the actions which are going inside an animal, okay, they can be, the actions basically, they can be either involuntary, okay, which are not under the will of an animal, and there are some actions which are voluntary actions. Voluntary actions are under the will of an animal. Okay, for example, I am moving my hand right now to write on the tablet, write on the board. Okay, involuntary actions, on the other hand, like the digestion going on right now inside me, or the breathing movements of the lungs, the heart, the heartbeat, all these are involuntary. They are not under the will, under my control. Okay, so reflex actions are what kind of actions? Reflex actions are involuntary actions. Okay, they are not under our control. So this typical example is a knee jerk reflex, which is shown here. Okay, so if something with something like tiny hammer is hit on the knee, Okay, the knee is kicked forward automatically. This is a knee jerk reflex, which is a perfect example of a reflex action. Okay, so here the muscles, they are taking the signal directly to the spinal cord. Okay, and the spinal cord is bringing the motor impulse back to the hamstring muscle, which causes the knee to kick forward. This is a knee jerk reflex. Okay, there are other reflex actions also. For example, blinking of the eye, coughing, sneezing, okay, hiccoughing, which are not under our control. Okay, when it is starting, when it will end, we do not know. So just like that, you can give a lot of examples of reflex action. And one thing that you have to remember is that reflex action, they are under the control of the spinal cord. Okay, so there can be two types of reflex action. Okay, there are spinal reflexes. Okay, spinal reflexes. The spinal cord is involved in the spinal reflexes, and there is no thinking involved in responding to the spinal reflexes. For example, blinking of the eye, or this knee jerk reflex also. Uh, Examples I will write: blinking of eye, knee jerk reflex, coughing, sneezing, etc. Okay, there are reflexes which are known as cerebral reflexes, and brain is involved in the cerebral reflexes. A little bit of thinking is involved in cerebral reflexes. I will tell you how. Suppose if you're standing and someone flashes a bright light on your face, okay, what are you going to do? You will perceive that the light is bright, okay, because it can be dim also. So that's why we are saying, if someone flashes bright light on your face, what are you going to do? There will be a little bit of thinking, and there will be a little bit of thinking, and the you will try to close the eyes. Okay, so closing of eyes on flashing bright light on the face. Okay, so there are spinal reflexes and cerebral reflexes. So this is a reflex arc. And before understanding the reflex arc, you have to understand that there are certain parts of a reflex arc. There is a stimulus, okay, which is received by the receptor. The receptor takes the signal via sensory neuron to the spinal cord. Okay, then the motor response is taken back from the spinal cord via motor neuron to the effector organ. Okay, and effector organ gives a particular response. Okay, so the afferent fibers, the afferent fiber is the sensory neuron, and the efferent one is the motor neuron. Okay, so we can discuss this with the help of an example here. Like the stimulus here can be a hot object. Okay, the receptor organ will be the skin, right? So the object is hot. This signal will be taken by the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord will bring the motor response via motor neuron to the effector organ, which are the muscles of hand. Okay, and the response is given, that is withdrawal of hand. Okay, now there are two types of reflexes. Okay, again, like according to the if learning is required or not. So apart from conditioned reflexes where learning is required, there are inborn or inherited reflexes also. Okay, the for inborn and inherited reflexes, there is no learning required, there is no experience required. You do not need to experience a reflex. Okay, so sneezing, coughing reflexes are inborn reflexes. Nobody tells us, nobody teaches us how to sneeze, how to cough, okay, how to inhale, how to exhale. All these are inherited reflexes. Okay, we are born with them, but there are some reflexes for which learning is required, and this was explained actually by a Russian physiologist, uh, Ivan Pavlov. Okay, so he did this experiment on dog where he with the help of an unconditioned stimulus, okay, and an unconditioned response, he converted them into a conditioned stimulus and a conditioned response. So such reflexes which are learned are known as conditioned reflexes. For these, experience is required. So he showed food to the dog, okay, and he observed salivation. So food is an unconditioned stimulus and salivation is an unconditioned response. So salivating at the sight of food is an inherited reflex, you can say. Then he whistled, okay, and the response that was given by the dog was no salivation. This was before conditioning. So whistle is a neutral stimulus, and the salivation, no salivation, was no conditioned response. Okay, but during conditioning, while he showed the food, he whistled also, and the response was salivation, and this is known as unconditioned response. But after doing this for many times, after conditioning, that means he blew the whistle, and the response that was given was salivation. The whistle, blowing of the whistle after conditioning, became the conditioned stimulus, and salivation after conditioning at the whistle blow was a conditioned response. Okay, so this is a conditioned reflex. The condition For the conditioned reflex to occur, we need to learn them, we need to experience them first of all, and they may change also. That means they may be forgotten also, because the response of the conditioned reflexes completely depends upon the environment that we are living in. So suppose if the environment doesn't require us to give that reflex, we will not give that reflex, and also we may forget it. Okay, so these are some of the conditions for the condition reflex to occur. Let's move on to the questions now. Okay, a man becomes unconscious due to head injury. A pin is pricked on his foot. He withdraw his foot. Why? Explain. So a man is unconscious, okay, but the pin is pricked on his foot. That means his brain is not working, but the spinal cord is working. So the pin is pricked on his foot. He withdraws his foot due because this is a reflex action, and in the reflex actions, brain is not involved, spinal cord is involved. Okay, that is why this is happening. And you already know what how you can explain, like if the pin is pricked, okay, the skin of the foot, it is receiving the signal, it is taking it to the spinal cord. Okay, so skin of the foot taking the signal to the spinal cord. Okay, from spinal cord it is taken to the muscles of the leg via the motor neuron. And the response is given by the muscles of the leg. Next question, on touching a hot plate, you suddenly withdraw your hand. Which category of neurons became active first? Which one next? So, the category of neurons that became active first are sensory neurons because they are taking the signal that the plate is hot to the spinal cord first. Okay, then the response from the spinal cord is coming from the motor neuron to the effector muscle or a gland. Okay, then how are involuntary actions and reflex action different from each other? So, involuntary actions and reflex actions. Okay. So, involuntary actions, we are not aware that they are happening. Okay. There is no awareness. Okay. But for the reflex actions to occur for the reflex, okay, there is awareness. But the person becomes aware after the response is given. Okay, sometimes a slap goes in a reflex. You slap someone in a reflex. Okay, so awareness comes, okay, but it is like afterwards. So let's move on. Which signals will get disrupted in case of a spinal cord injury? Obviously, the reflex actions will get disrupted. Okay, next question. What is the difference between a reflex action and walking? So, reflex action is involuntary. I'm going to make two. Okay, this is involuntary. This is voluntary completely. Spinal cord is involved in the execution of a reflex action. But in case of walking, cerebellum is involved, right? So these are the differences between reflex action and walking. Okay. So next, you have touched a hot object. Represent diagrammatically the path that leads to a response that is quickly pulling back the hand. Okay. Yes. So we can do this very easily with the help of a diagram. I'm going to make a reflex arc instead, not the diagram. Okay. So this is the skin. Okay, which is the receptor. Then skin gives the via the sensory neuron. I'll just elongate the via the sensory neuron. It is taken to the spinal cord. Okay. Then via the spinal cord, it is the response is coming via the motor neuron to the muscles of the hand, and by which the response is given, that is pulling back the hand. Okay. Muscles of the hand are the effector organ here. So this is the path that leads to a response. Next question, what is the number of cranial nerves and spinal nerves in human beings? So the number of cranial nerves are 12 and the number of spinal nerves is 31 pairs. Sorry, you have to write pairs also. Name the part of the brain which controls voluntary action and the one which controls involuntary action. What is the significance of the peripheral nervous system? And name the components of this nervous system and distinguish between the origin of the two. Okay. So the part of the brain which controls the voluntary actions, you already know. This is cerebellum. Okay. We discussed in the previous video. And the part of the brain which is involved in the involuntary action is medulla oblongata. Okay. What is the significance of the peripheral nervous system? It is involved in all the changes in the body during an emergency. Okay. And the components of this nervous system are parasympathetic, no, sorry, the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. Okay. And the origin of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves is the cranial nerves are arising from the brain. Okay. And the spinal nerves are arising from the spinal cord. Okay. Next question, label the paths 1, 2, 3, 4 and show the direction of flow of electrical signals in the figure. Okay, so the flow of the electrical signals in the figure is basically shown, but the first part is the receptor. Okay, no, it is not the receptor. Second is the spinal cord, obviously. Okay, first part is a sensory neuron. Okay, part 3 is a motor neuron. And part 4 is the effector organ. Okay, then it is from sensory to the spinal cord, from spinal cord to the motor neuron to the effector organ. This is the direction of flow. So, what are cerebrospinal fluid and what are its function? So, cerebrospinal fluid, abbreviated as CSF, it is a fluid which is present in the cavities of the brain and spinal cord. It protects the brain and spinal cord against mechanical shocks and injuries. Okay. So with this, I'm going to end the videos. I hope you liked it. Stay tuned for the next video. And if you have any doubts, you can post them on the forum. I will be very happy to answer them. Thank you.